But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Hi, welcome to another edition of Footprints in American History. Today we're going to talk about standing room only. Now, a lot of you who are older may remember the moon landings. Back between 1969, July 20th, when we first landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong stepped down and said his famous words, all the way through the early 1970s with Apollo 17. Now, during this time, John Kennedy was the president who inspired part of the space program, saying, we choose to go to the moon. And we did. However, this was quite a challenge for American engineers. We had to come up with so many ways to be able to do more than simply go into Earth orbit. We had to get out of the Earth's orbit and get to the moon, which was a very long distance. Most journeys took between 6 and 8 days. Now, when they were designing this, they were faced with a lot of challenges. We were going into the unknown. Now, one of those unknowns was designing the Lunar Landing Module. Now, we had the command module. That was what stayed in orbit around the moon, and you had one person on board that, and then you had 2 astronauts who went down to the moon and landed on it, and they had to use the Lunar Excursion Module, more known as the LEM, or some people also just refer to it as the Lunar Module. Now, designing that took a lot of work with the engineers. Astronauts were a huge part of this. After all, they were going to be flying the craft. They were going to be living in this, so this was going to be quite a challenge to design. What they were trying to do was figure out ways of where to put the equipment, how to have the windows set up, how to be able to pilot the spacecraft, where to store things. It was quite a challenge, not to mention that these astronauts had very bulky suits and huge helmets to deal with. Now, when they were doing this, they had a lot of input from the astronauts. One of the concerns they had was about the seating arrangements. You have to understand, they only had so much space in this lunar module. So they had to figure out, how can we do this best? How can we do it where we're going to have seating, we can have the astronauts comfortable, and so on for this journey to the moon? And eventually, now they looked at all these different ways, but what they realized was just this took up a lot of space and it was very heavy. They even considered ideas like bar stools type arrangements, and then they realized, why use it at all? Why have the astronauts necessarily sit? They're going to be in low gravity, they're only going to be flying for a short period of time. So they made the decision to actually go without seating arrangements. Now, when they did it, they only had, during liftoff, during powered spaceflight, they were only dealing with about 1 G of gravity. When they were coming in for landing, they did get up to 5 Gs. However, that was a very short period of time that they were enduring it. So they had to resolve these issues, and that was one of the ones that they decided, we're going to have the astronauts stand in the lunar module during the landing and during takeoff. And I actually want to read to you one of the documents that NASA published regarding how they stood, and this will help explain it to you because this is definitely a piece of history that you don't hear a lot about. This is from NASA. At this point, the seat and window problems merged. Standing up, the crew would be close enough to the windows to get a larger field of view. One engineer estimated at 20 times greater. So not only was it a problem solver as far as space in the cabin, they had to move about. This was their living quarters, so they had very little space to move about, but it also allowed them to see out of the windows much better because they weren't seated back in seats, they were standing in a window. And you are going to see a diagram which will show you what the pilots, how they were standing, so it gave them a much better view through the cockpit windows than any seating arrangement yet suggested. Moreover, since cockpit designers would not have to worry about knee room, the cabin could be shortened, saving 27 kilograms and improving the structure. Conrad, as in astronaut Pete Conrad, called it a trolley car configuration and said, quote, "We get much closer to the instruments without our knees getting in the way, and our vision downward toward the moon surface is greatly improved," end quote. It goes on to say, Grumman technicians later devised a restraint system to hold the pilots in place during weightless flights and prevent them from being jostled about the cabin during landing. Now, I want to point out to you that one of the things that they learned during their training was that they were getting jostled around a lot. In reality, during the moon landings, it was actually much gentler. Every astronaut reported that. So, it prevented them from being jostled about the cabin during landing, resembling the harness used by window washers and linked to a pulley and cable arrangement under constant tension. It was augmented by handholds and armrests and by Velcro strips to keep the pilot's feet on the floor. And the reason for that was because they were being jostled. It was more of a concern about being jostled left and right. So they wanted to be able to keep those pilots' feet firmly in place so that they were able to absorb the shock. They considered that the human body is a great shock absorber, the way our legs and ankles and knees are designed. So they figured that into the situation. And so they were more concerned about them being jostled left and right mostly when they came in for a landing and when they took off. So they stood at the window, they were able to look out of it. However, the sleeping arrangements was a little bit different. They, as the missions got later into the program, they arranged the hammock system and they were making it more and more comfortable for them, so they were able to sleep for the short times that they were on the moon's surface where they did need rest. My name's Jeff Dial. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like and share the videos, subscribe to the channel, and if you get a chance, ring the bell. That'll give you notifications anytime we do a future video. In the meantime, thanks for watching, fair winds, and following seas.